we're going to talk about musical theater and film. One thing I really want you to pay attention to as you review musical theater is how the set and the costumes and the setting and all of that and the music come together to really enhance the story. Think about back to Shakespeare's day. Plays only had costumes and actors and maybe some props, but there was no scenery. So pay attention to how all these things help to enhance the story. If you've noticed this semester, my virtual background that I've been using, this is the proscenium to the Majestic Theater here in San Antonio where I live. And so the proscenium, this is this kind of facade that you get in theaters. So this theater is a very, very old historic theater, and you can see a lot of the architecture that came from this. And so architecture really inspired this time period as well. And it was very important. These were centers of culture where people came together to share ideas. And so architecture became a part of this art as well.
First, we got to start over in Tin Pan Alley. So, Tin Pan Alley was called Tin Pan Alley because this is where musicians would go to meet with producers to try to get their music published. And there were so many people playing different instruments and pianos and all kinds of craziness going on that it sounded like people beating tin pans with spoons. So it garnered the nickname Tin Pan Alley. And so music publishers, these are people who control the business of music. You would go to a music publisher to help you navigate the legal side of things, and they help to get your music out to the world. So some songs that came out from Tin Pan Alley: Take Me Out to the Ball Game, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, Camptown Races. Camptown Races, sing that song, doo-dah, doo-dah. I probably messed up the words, oh well. And then Oh Susanna, oh Susanna, don't you cry for me. I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. And then Beautiful Dreamer, beautiful dreamer, wake unto me. That's the kind of songs that were coming out of this time period. And this is an amazing time period for music, but there was some really bad things going on with copyright. So we're going to get to that later in this video, but also more in depth in class. Sale of sheet music. The sheet music coming from this time period had to be accessible. So we have a lot of big band jazz happening, except for when that music was transferred to sheet music, all the improvisation was taken out. It had to be accessible to a mid-level musician, a amateur musician. So they took out all the really hard stuff and they made it more accessible. So everything was very diluted. It wasn't as over the top as the original pieces. They wanted to get the music sold. They had to make it accessible to the people. So Tin Pan Alley, this is a specific strip in New York City on Manhattan. It's not there anymore. We don't have Tin Pan Alley anymore. It's not the center of the music business. But it is in Manhattan, and so it also coincided with Broadway. But before we get to Broadway, copyright laws. So royalties, this is what somebody is paid every time music is sold. And royalties, it doesn't necessarily relate just to music. There can be a lot of things that you can get royalties on. But for the music business, example, I wrote a piece of music and a music publisher helped me sell it. Typically, I'm selling it to the music publisher, but I will get a royalty of every time the song is sold for $1, I get 5 cents. That's a royalty. But royalties didn't work so well during this time period. Unfortunately, a lot of times composers were paid a flat rate instead of an ongoing rate. So the publisher would be like, I'm going to give you $200 to have full-on rights on that song. But then the publisher makes $2 million on it. It was very, very unbalanced at the time, especially if you were African American. They typically would do this to African Americans more so than other ethnic groups, which is horrible, and we're going to talk more about that in class. We're going to go way in depth in that in class. It's just not good. So these are the three different societies that popped up during this time period to help regulate copyright law. We get the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, and they really helped to make sure that royalties were paid. Sometimes they didn't even pay the royalties, even though they said they would. Broadcast Music Incorporated, licensing the music and making sure that the publisher and the composer had their rights written down. Then we get the Society of European Stage Authors and Composers, and they worked on licenses and protecting music rights as well. So now we have Broadway, and Broadway has its roots in Greek plays and the amphitheaters that they had. Greek plays were a big part of the culture of the time, and it just kind of trickled down to today to Broadway. But before we got to Broadway, we had vaudeville, and vaudeville were traveling performances, and this is Abbott and Costello. If you know Who's on Third, go look it up. It's a hilarious little bit, but it's music, comedy, acrobatics, Shakespeare, magic. It's a variety show. It's a little bit of everything. And so they were traveling performances that eventually developed into musicals. So important people in musicals, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and they really were instrumental in creating these big extravagant set pieces and costuming, and their music really helped with the characterization and flow and development of the story. So Rodgers and Hammerstein, very, very important people. That's a quiz question, by the way. So now film. We get silent films first, where there was subtitles describing the scene. We didn't have yet the technology where talking could be with the show itself. And there would be someone in the theater playing organ to go with the film. Now, not always was there a song written for the film. Oftentimes, it was just, they were just playing whatever. But eventually we developed where songs were written to go with the film. And then we developed where the music was recorded, voices were recording, so on and so forth. And so we get a soundtrack that goes with it. And this is, once again, before they were on the same loop, the soundtrack was the recorded music that was played at the same time as the film recording. Then we get the film score. This is the music written for the film. And then now we're getting commercials. We're getting TV shows. So think about a commercial. Think about the one that pops in your head first. Those little jingles are amazingly simple, but that simplicity is what catches your attention. And so music is very instrumental in that. It gets stuck in your head, it catches your attention, and this is what helps them to sell products. Variety TV shows, we still have these today. Think like Jay Leno, that kind of situation. A little variety TV show, late night show, all that kind of stuff. These are starting to pop up, and they would have a band on set, and they still have them today, bands on set, or they would bring in musical acts. Same thing today. We also get American Bandstand, and this show was centered around, completely centered around music. They would have different current artists come and perform on the show, and there were teenagers that were dancing, and that was the entire premise of the show, was teenagers dancing. That was it. It was all about fashion and music. Eventually we get MTV, Music Television, and MTV was originally all about the music. It was just music 24/7. It's not so much that way anymore, but back then it was. We also get several other music stations. We get VH1 eventually. We get BET. All kinds of amazing music coming out of this time period.
Impossible for a plain yellow pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Impossible for a plain country bumpkin and a prince to join in marriage.